Whatever else is true, bullet 399, contrary to the commission's finding, was not a super bullet. It did not cause Governor Connally's wounds. It did not travel through the bodies of both men. It did not defy the laws of probability, the laws of physics, and the laws of forensic pathology. What it did do was appear mysteriously in Parkland Hospital. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess, Connell, and if you're new, then I'd like to welcome you, and I'd also love to earn your subscription today. We are past the actual event of the assassination in our walkthrough of JFK Circling the Truth, but now we are into investigative mode. We are looking at various aspects of the case and trying to hone in through a variety of literature. So one today and one that's upcoming that are right here. I have others right here close at hand that we'll be doing soon. And this says eBay, but there's the copies that you're looking for. But we are going to be going through so many different books because people have been generous and shared their libraries with me, shared generously from their book collections. And so I want to be a good steward. I also want to familiarize myself with the breadth of JFK literature. So here we are. I believe this is part 18, and we are going through In the Shadow of Dallas, a primer on the assassination of President Kennedy. It says it's published by the editors of Ramparts magazine. So there is no printing date, but when I looked it up, it said it was published in 1967 by the editors of Ramparts magazine. And so I wanted to read you a little bit about the publication itself before we move into the selection that we're going to read today. It says, our first inclination was to believe the Warren Commission. Along with the majority of Americans and a large plurality of the American press, we were awed by the absolute massiveness of the Commission's 26 volumes. By the literal weight of the evidence, Oswald had to have murdered the president alone, as the commission found. It has been difficult to dislodge us of that conviction. We are not conspiracy prone, and frankly, we were unwilling to embrace the frightening extensions of the proposition that the commission was wrong. We elected to withhold any comment on the assassination until we were convinced that the commission had actually compromised the truth about the assassination. We are now certain of that. Beginning in January 1966, a team of Ramparts editors, aided by researchers and trained investigators, read, reread, cataloged, and analyzed the 26 volumes of the Warren Report. They traveled to Dallas a dozen times and interviewed nearly 100 people throughout the country knowledgeable about the assassination. They have come to the conclusion that the Warren Commission has done the country an enormous disservice, that not only the odds but the evidence are against its conclusions, that the weight of evidence indicates the existence of more than one assassin. Indeed, there would seem to be two conspiracies. One was to murder the president. The other was to cover up the blunders of various federal and state agencies which made the assassination possible, and to present the public with a panacea. We do not believe the two conspiracies are related. We pray they are not. So that is their perspective in 1967. The idea is there very clearly that the Warren Commission had failed, had done a disservice to the American people, but also the idea that there are two conspiracies we are talking about. One is to actually do the deed of the assassination. The other is to cover it up, and that the two are not necessarily connected. That's important. So we are going to start on page 75. It's called The Wounding of Connally, because we have already looked through the bullets and the wounds. Now we're going to look at the wounding of Connally. Very interesting. By now it should be apparent from the wealth of evidence to the contrary that the one bullet through two men theory is a construct. That President Kennedy and Governor Connally were in fact hit by separate bullets is further borne out by Connally's own testimony and that of his wife, as well as by an analysis of the Zapruder film. Governor Connally testified, quote, and this next 3 paragraphs is all him, so listen up. We turned on Elm Street. We had just made the turn. Well, when I heard what I thought was a shot, I heard this noise, which I immediately took to be a rifle shot. I instinctively turned to my right because the sound appeared to come from over my right shoulder. but I did not catch the president in the corner of my eye. And I was interested because once I heard the shot in my own mind, I identified it as a rifle shot. And the only thought that crossed my mind was that this is an assassination attempt. So I looked, failing to see him. I was turning to look back over my left shoulder into the back seat, but I never got that far in my turn. So he turns to look, can't quite catch a glimpse of the president, he says. He can't catch him in the corner of his eye. So he turns, and he's intending to turn and look back over this shoulder, but he never makes it that far. He says, quote, "And then I felt like someone had hit me in the back. The thought immediately passed through my mind that there were either 2 or 3 people involved or more in this, or someone was shooting with an automatic rifle. Mrs. Connally pulled me over to her lap. I reclined with my head in her lap, conscious all the time, and with my eyes open. And then, of course, the third shot sounded, and I heard the shot very clearly. I heard it hit him." The governor was questioned by Commission Counsel Arlen Specter. "In your view, which bullet caused the injury to your chest, Governor Connally?" "The second one." "And what is your reason for that conclusion, sir?" "Well, in my judgment, it just couldn't conceivably have been the first one because I heard the sound of the shot. In the first place, I don't know anything about the velocity of this particular bullet, but any rifle has a velocity that exceeds the speed of sound. And when I heard the sound of that first shot, the bullet had already reached where I was, or it had reached that far. And after I heard that shot, I had time to turn to my right and to start to turn to my left before I felt anything. It is not conceivable to me that I was hit by the first shot." In television interviews, press conferences, and a detailed interview with Life magazine in which he examined the Zapruder film, Governor Connally has stuck to his testimony and to the reasoning behind it. It is true that the governor has also described himself as satisfied with the Warren Commission's reasoning on other points and with its conclusions regarding Oswald as the lone assassin. But as we have seen, if his own testimony is accurate, those conclusions must be in error. Mrs. Connally's testimony before the commission corroborated that of her husband. "I heard a noise, and not being an expert rifleman, I was not aware it was a rifle. I turned over my right shoulder and looked back, and I saw the president as he had both hands at his neck." Like that. "Then very soon there was the second shot that hit John Connally. As the first shot was hit and I turned to look at the same time, I recall John saying, 'Oh, no, no, no.' There was a second shot, and it hit John. And as he recoiled to the right, just crumpled like a wounded animal to the right, he said, 'My God, they are going to kill us all.'" The Zapruder film further bears out the Connally's version of what happened. Commissioner Alan Dulles examined the film and immediately noticed that Kennedy was reacting to his hit well before Connally showed any sign of being wounded. He had this exchange with Commissioner John McCloy. "You think if Connally had been hit at the same time as Kennedy, he would have reacted in the same way and not reacted much later, as these pictures show?" "That is right. Because the wounds would have been inflicted." "That is what puzzles me." "That is what puzzles me." So McCloy said, "That is what puzzles me." Then Dulles said, "That is what puzzles me." The shot that hit Connally shattered 10 centimeters of his rib, fractured his right wrist in 7 pieces, and pierced his left thigh, assuming that Connally was hit only once. The commission's argument that Connally may have had a delayed reaction to the shot is contradicted by the testimony of Dr. Shaw of Parkland Hospital. But there could be a delay in any appreciable reaction between the time of the impact of the bullet and the occurrence. So they're asking, is it possible for a bullet to strike a person and there to be a delayed reaction? And he says, yes. This is Dr. Shaw from Parkland Hospital. Yes, but in the case of a wound which strikes a bony substance, such as a rib, which it did, usually the reaction is quite prompt. Despite the governor's testimony, the Zapruder film, and the wealth of other evidence, the commission nevertheless contended that Kennedy and Connally were hit by the same bullet. Aside from a negative conclusion that the bullet did not strike the automobile, the only evidence adduced by the commission to show that it did strike Connally is a garbled version of Fraser's testimony. He was asked to give his expert opinion on the basis of a set of highly questionable assumptions. So This is Spector. This is Arlen Spector. We've just read in our previous episodes different times of him interacting with witnesses. Let's recall his posture. His posture towards Jean Hill was to bully her before her questioning, reportedly, and there are other witnesses to this as well, to speak down to her, to make her feel very demeaned and foolish about her extramarital, which she was already separated from her husband, but her affair with a police officer, and then also about assuming that there had been a dog in the car, which we've talked about. That was that lamb chops puppet that she misinterpreted in the moment. So he's demeaned her. This is a grown man speaking to I think she was around 30 years old, a roughly middle-aged woman, talking down to her like that. He did the same to Lee Bowers. And now here's what he's like when he's with a witness that he's trying to lead in a particular direction, not a witness he's trying to shut down, which let's just put ourselves in those shoes and say, if you were an honest investigator, if you were a lawyer who had no agenda but the truth, wouldn't your posture be the same in every single interview? Ma'am, take as much time as you need. We need the truth. Whatever is required in order for you to communicate accurately what your recollections are, that's what this commission needs. Take a moment. And respectful, right, to every witness. And the same to every witness. Let's see what he's like towards this person, Frazier. Mr. Frazier, assuming the factors which I have asked you to accept as true, as to the flight of the bullet and the straight line penetration through the president's body, do you have an opinion as to what probably happened during the interval between frames 207 and 225, as to whether the bullet which passed through the neck of the president entered the governor's back? Remember, whenever we're talking about magic bullet, we are not talking about the entrance wound, which we've already gone through and we know was an entrance wound. We're talking about it as if it came through the back and out here and now is going down towards the governor. And basically, we need it to delay because there's a 1.7 second problem in the reaction between the two men. But he says, do you have anything as to what happened during that interval? Frazier says, there are a lot of probables in that. First, we have to assume there is absolutely no deflection in the bullet from the time it left the barrel until the time it exited from the governor's body. I feel that physically this would have been possible. However, I myself don't have any technical evidence which would support it as far as my rendering an opinion as an expert. I would certainly say it was possible, but I don't say that it probably occurred because I don't have the evidence on which to base a statement like that. Frazier elaborated, we are dealing with a hypothetical situation here, so when you say, would it probably have occurred, then you are asking me for an opinion, to base my opinion on a whole set of hypothetical facts, which I can't substantiate. This is the FBI's expert on weapons and ballistics. And so he's the one, and even somebody who's from the FBI is like, well, you're asking me not to tell you exact things, but to give you an opinion as to the probability that something is possible. The Warren Commission used Frazier's testimony in support of the single bullet theory. The report states, Frazier testified that it probably struck Governor Connally. Frazier, as we have seen, had said nothing of the kind. He said, we have to assume that there is absolutely no deflection in the bullet from the time it left the barrel until the time it exited from the governor's body. And he says, I feel that physically this would have been possible. But he would not weigh in about probability. But they said, and this is the Warren report. Again, this is the book, the one, I have mine in a bag, but the one book summary of the commission testimonies, supposedly a summary. But this is how they characterized that exchange. Is that an accurate characterization? You can decide for yourself. Frazier, they conclude, said nothing of the kind. The necessary conclusion to this evidence is that Kennedy and Connally were hit by separate bullets. This means they were hit by at least 2 gunmen firing from the rear, because, as the commission found, they were both wounded from the rear in less time than necessary to fire the alleged murder weapon twice. So basically, because they were 1.7 seconds apart, you can't have them both coming from the same gun. There had to be 2 gunmen from the rear. Then we have what they call the super bullet. It hadn't yet perhaps gotten its moniker, the magic bullet theory. But we have the super bullet. And they call it the stretcher bullet. It says, a major piece of evidence linking the assassination to the bolt-action rifle found on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository is a bullet that fell from a stretcher in Parkland Hospital shortly after the shooting. Ballistics test showed that the bullet, Commission Exhibit 399, was fired from that rifle. It became a crucial element in the case against Lee Harvey Oswald. The Commission contends that Bullet 399, as it is called, or CE 399 is how you can look it up, is the bullet that entered the president from the rear, exited at his throat, entered Connally's back, smashed through his chest, wrist, and thigh. Fragments were left in the governor's wrist and thigh. Bullet 399 was found virtually undeformed, its jacket intact. The bullet that later hit the president's head, which according to the commission's version of the assassination must have been of the same type as Bullet 399 and fired seconds later from the same rifle. See, they're holding the logic of the commission up to itself to be examined. It says, fragmented into 30 or 40 tiny dust-like particle fragments, according to Dr. Humes. Yet the commission argues that Bullet 399 passed through both men, shattered more than 4 inches of the governor's 5th rib, broke his right wrist into pieces, wounded his left thigh, and emerged beautifully whole and undeformed. That is a beautiful paragraph. I mean, it's an awful, horrific paragraph, but for logic's sake, it's a beautifully written one. That one bullet, supposedly fired from the same rifle, in the same particulars, everything the same, strikes the president's head. That would have been from the back. That's making that assumption of the Warren Commission. If it strikes, remember how far we had to lean down to try to get to the right spot in order for there to be the exit wound that didn't explode out the face. So we have to lean President Kennedy way far down. But let's say we do that, and we put in this as an entrance wound. We take it out of the back and we move it up to the neck, and we say, okay, that's the entrance wound that then led to the president's head exploding. Well, why did that one barely strike and fragment into 30 or 40 tiny dust-like particle fragments? That's a quote from Dr. Humes. Yet, bullet CE99 goes through Kennedy, Connally, Connally's wrist, shatters 5 inches worth of that, and lodges in the governor's thigh, and leaves pieces throughout, and yet emerges perfect. That's the question: is why are there 2 different modes of the same bullet from the same angle, and one would seemingly fragment more? Which one would you think would fragment more? The one that barely struck and then comes out, or the one that goes through all those wounds that we just described? And yet they're the reverse. So that's a beautifully written comparison there. Dr. Humes testified upon seeing the bullet, this missile is basically intact. Its jacket appears to me to be intact. Dr. Shaw of the Parkland staff declared, I would have to say that this bullet has lost literally none of its substance. Bullet 399 was not only unmutilated after the bone-shattering journey it is said to have taken, it also had no recognizable trace of blood or tissue on its surface. Questioned by Commission Counsel Melvin Eisenberg, the FBI ballistics expert Frazier again testifies. He says, so this is Eisenberg, did you prepare the bullet in any way for examination? That is, did you clean it or in any way alter it? No, sir, it was not necessary. The bullet was clean, and it was not necessary to change it in any way. There was no blood or similar material on the bullet when you received it? Not any which would interfere with the examination, no, sir. Thus, no macroscopic amounts of blood or tissue were found on this bullet. Obviously, Fraser's testimony leaves open the possibility that microscopic traces existed. We know only that the FBI performed a spectrographic analysis on the bullet, and that spectrographer John F. Gallagher, who testified before the commission, was never asked about these findings. Of course not, because the things that are of interest are never asked by the Warren Commission. They shut down things we are interested in and show no interest in things that we're interested in, and instead are off leading witnesses towards things they never said and telling us that they did say them. Fraser testified that bullet 399 weighed 158.6 grains. He weighed several other 6.5 millimeter bullets picked at random and found that they all weighed from 160 to 161. But Fraser added that even with a bullet weighing 158.6 grains, there did not necessarily have to be any weight loss to the bullet. The mass missing from the bullet was so minuscule, there are approximately 432 grains to an ounce. So we're talking about the whole bullet weighing about 1/3 of an ounce, that the FBI expert would not offer an opinion that it represented any weight loss at all. So the FBI man would not say that there was any weight loss. Even if bullet 399 originally weighed 161 grains before its purported journey through the two men, its weight loss as a result of its various collisions would be about 2.4 grains. That is 1/180th of an ounce. Not only did the bullet fragments in Connally's body appear to add up to more than that, but the governor's doctors and government pathologists stated their opinion based on the presence of these fragments, that bullet 399 could not have caused all his wounds. Chief autopsy surgeon Humes, for example, testified, now looking at that bullet, exhibit 399, this is Spector asking, Dr. Humes, could that missile have made the wound on Governor Connally's right wrist? Here's his answer, Dr. Humes. I think that is most unlikely. Going to Exhibit 392, the report from Parkland Hospital, operative record of Dr. Charles Gregory, the following sentence referring to the examination of the wound in the wrist is found. Small bits of metal were encountered at various levels throughout the wound, and these were, wherever they were identified and could be picked up and submitted to the pathology department for identification and examination. The reason I believe it is most unlikely that this missile could have inflicted either of these wounds, referring also to the president's head wound, is that this missile is basically intact. Its jacket appears to me to be intact, and I do not understand how it could possibly have left fragments in either of these locations. Not only did Dr. Humes rule out the possibility that bullet 399 caused the governor's wrist wound, but also the possibility that it caused the wound in his thigh. Humes responded to a question on this point by Spector. I think that extremely unlikely. The reports, again, Exhibit 392 from Parkland, operative record of Dr. Tom Shires, tell of an entrance wound on the lower mid-thigh of the governor, and x-rays taken there are described as showing metallic fragments in the bone, which apparently by this report were not removed and are still present in Governor Connally's thigh. I can't conceive of where they came from this missile. So, it says, in Dr. Humes' view, there was too much metal in either the governor's wrist or his thigh to have been caused by bullet 399. This is precisely what we talked about in Dr. Crenshaw's book, Conspiracy of Silence. He talked about observing the removal of 5 fragments from the governor's wrist and noted that there was a remaining portion in the thigh. And so he made this exact same case later in the 90s. But this is the ballistics man making the exact same case before the Warren Commission, y'all. This is not like, oh, in the 90s, they knew different things. This is what's being said to Arlen Spector during the Warren Commission by an FBI ballistics expert. Now we hear from Dr. Pierre Fink. Dr. Pierre Fink, a forensic pathologist who assisted at the autopsy, also testified. Spector asked, could it have been the bullet which inflicted the wound on Governor Connally's right wrist? Dr. Fink, no, for the reason that there are too many fragments described in that wrist. It's almost like Spector is just feeling through various interviews, trying to find anybody who will go along with his theory. anybody who will say, yeah, that is possible. Yeah. And he keeps hitting experts that are like, no, the fragments in the wrist. Dr. Robert Shaw, who attended the governor at Parkland Hospital, testified about bullet 399. He said, as far as the wounds of the chest are concerned, I feel that this bullet could have inflicted those wounds. But the examination of the wrist, both by x-ray and at the time of surgery, showed some fragments of metal that make it difficult to believe that the same missile could have caused these two wounds. There seemed to be more than 3 grains of metal in the wrist. I feel there would be some difficulty in explaining all of the wounds as being inflicted by bullet exhibit 399 without causing more in the way of loss of substance to the bullet or deformation of the bullet. Another piece of Dr. Shaw's testimony has been stretched beyond recognition by the commission, asked whether, regardless of what bullet it was, one bullet did in fact cause all of Governor Connally's wounds. So this is not saying, the question that's being asked is not, did CE 399 that went through the president also cause all of Governor Connally's wounds? But this question is just, is it possible that one bullet caused all of Governor Connally's wounds? His back, or his upper armpit, his chest, his wrist, and then his thigh. Could just those wounds have been done by one bullet? Here is Dr. Shaw's reply. I have no firm opinion, but here is how the report wrote it. Quote, in their testimony, the 3 doctors who attended Governor Connally at Parkland Hospital expressed independently their opinion that a single bullet had passed through his chest, tumbled through his wrist, punctured his left thigh, and had fallen out of the thigh wound. In their testimony. That's what they summed up, y'all. It's completely dishonest. They lied to us. The report's distortion concerning bullet 399, however, was much more serious. Despite the existence of all the metal fragments in Governor Connally's body, despite the undeformed and bloodless state of the bullet, and despite explicit testimony of 3 doctors that bullet 399 could not have caused the wrist wound, the report concluded all the evidence indicated that the bullet found on the governor's stretcher could have caused all his wounds. All the evidence. Y'all, I guess you have to know, this is my first time of seeing so much side by side. We've talked about it in the, like Dr. Crenshaw's book, we've talked about it in various places, but it's more like one piece of evidence that's elucidated over the course of a page or a chapter. But to hear this many examples in such close succession of complete misrepresentation of what doctors, FBI guys, all of it, are saying to the Warren Commission, and instead something very different was presented to the American people. This is a farce. It is lying. I'm so angry. Perhaps you're angry too. Let's keep reading. We have a little bit left. There was, of course, evidence adduced in support of this conclusion, the testimony of one physiologist and one veterinarian employed at the Army's arsenal. They had been instructed to shoot Carcano bullets through goat meat, horse meat, goat bone, and gelatin blocks in order to determine whether a bullet from that rifle had the penetrating power to go through 2 men. They said it did. But Commission Counsel Spector's questioning of Dr. Zyman, the physiologist, and Alfred Olivier, the veterinarian, was not confined to the results of their experiments. So these men are allowed to wander in what they're willing to speculate about. But other people who give accounts that Arlen is not interested in, he smacks them back down and says, are you an expert in ballistics? Are you an expert in gunshot wounds? Did you take a course on identifying gunshot wounds? Like, he's real quick to do that with people who are just giving the facts as they see it. But with these people, he's letting them speculate. Doctors Zyman and Olivier, instructed only to determine the penetrating power of a bullet fired from a Carcano, were called upon to testify on what happened to a specific Carcano bullet 5 months before and thousands of miles away. Not because of any suspicion of venality attaches, but simply because of the subtle ways in which ideas are transferred among men in contact. It may be interesting that the man who questioned these men about their opinions, Commission Counsel Spector, was also the man who first introduced the super bullet theory to the commission. Questions remain. If, as now seems clear, one bullet did not go through both men, then where is the bullet or bullets that wounded Connally? And if the intact bullet 399 did not cause Connally's wounds, as the evidence now shows that it did not, then where did it come from? So he addresses the issue of bullet 399. Was it a plant? He goes through that question. We are not going to go through that part, but I want you to know that there are questions about how the bullet showed up. These men get to the end of that and they say, the question inescapably follows, was it a plant or was it on Kennedy's stretcher after all? And was bullet 399 the bullet that traveled a finger length into President Kennedy's back, later to drop back out through the entry wound as the Parkland doctors struggled to save the president's life? Whatever else is true, bullet 399, contrary to the commission's finding, was not a super bullet. It did not cause Governor Connally's wounds. It did not travel through the bodies of both men. It did not defy the laws of probability, the laws of physics, and the laws of forensic pathology. What it did do was appear mysteriously in Parkland Hospital. So that is the look at Governor Connally's wounds and at that super bullet from 1967, you guys. And we are looking at testimony that was fully available to the Warren Commission. This isn't, some of these books that were written in the 90s or later on in the 70s or the 80s. Yeah, I've got my whole collection here. Some of these books, maybe they bring up evidence that wasn't found at the time. Maybe they bring up a witness that hadn't been called before the commission. But the things that are being analyzed in this selection were all available to the Warren Commission members. And we can see the ways that they completely overrode certain testimonies and completely massaged and got what they wanted out of other testimonies just in this short selection. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about Governor Connally's wounds? What do you think about the idea that perhaps 2 or more bullets caused his wounds? What do you think about the idea that 399 could not have been that same bullet because of the fragments and the portion left in the thigh? Well, next time we are going to look at a chapter. We have read a portion of this book before. We are going to look at JFK Breaking the Silence by Bill Sloan. He is the one who helped Jean Hill write her book. And we are going to look at chapter 6, which is called The Forgotten Victim. It's all about Jim Tague and the not so magic bullet. So we are going to hear about the Jim Tague bullet. We're going to understand that better by the end of that. I'm trying to help acquaint you guys and acquaint myself with the variety of bullet trajectories, the variety of known evidence that points away from 3 lone bullets from a lone gunman from behind. Instead, we're trying to look at, what did the doctors say? What did the FBI ballistics experts say was possible? What did Connally say about what he experienced and what he heard? And then next time we're going to get into Jim Tague and what he experienced, what he felt, what happened to him, and that other bullet that required then for the commission to go in search of the magic bullet theory. So come back for that. I hope you're enjoying the series. Let me know in the comments what you think, what you've learned. I always love hearing from you. I hope you have a great day. Bye.